awoke in her bed, blurry-eyed. "Egwene," she said, disoriented. "What?" The last memories of the dream were dissolving like honey consumed by warm tea, but Egwene's words remained firm in Elaine's mind. "The serpent has fallen," Egwene had said. "Your brother's return was timely." Elaine sat up, feeling a surge of relief. She had spent the entire night trying to channel enough to make her dream Turangrial work, to no avail. When she'd found out that Birgitta had turned away Gawain, while Elaine sat inside, furious but unable to attend the meeting with Egwene, she'd been livid. Well, Masana had been defeated, it seemed. And what was that about her brother? She smiled. Perhaps he and Egwene had worked out their problems. Morning light peeked through the drapes. Elaine sat back, feeling the powerful warmth through the bond with Rand that had appeared there. Light, but that was a wonderful sensation. The moment she'd begun feeling it, the cloud cover around Andor had broken. It had been about a week since the testing of the dragons, and she'd put all of the Bell founders in her nation to work on creating them. These days one could hear a steady sound in Camelin, repeating booms as members of the band trained with the weapons in the hills outside of the city. So far she had let only a few of the weapons be used for training. The different teams rotated practicing on them. She'd gathered the larger number in a secret warehouse inside Camelin for safekeeping. She thought about the dream sending again. She hungered for specifics. Well, Egwene would probably send a messenger by gateway eventually. The door cracked, and Melfane looked in. "Your Majesty," the short, round-faced woman asked. "Is everything all right? I thought I heard a cry of pain." Ever since lifting her ban on Elaine remaining in bed, the midwife had decided to sleep in the antechamber outside Elaine's bedroom to keep a careful watch on her. "That was an exclamation of joy, Melfane," Elaine said. "A greeting for the wonderful morning that has come to us."
Yeah, roll one up too. Got some actual
Elaine tried to act cheerful around
today.
to persuade her that more bed rest wasn't needed. But perhaps that last part had been a little much. Elaine couldn't afford to appear as if she were forcing herself to be happy, even if she was. Insufferable woman.
I can't remember what the name of
Melfane
it.
walked in and pulled open the drapes. Sunlight was good for a woman with child, she'd explained. Part of Elaine's treatment lately had been to sit in her bed with the covers drawn back, letting the spring sunlight bake her skin.
I was able
As
to get a little bit
Melfane
of
moved,
wax.
Elaine felt a little tremble from inside. "Oh, there was another. They're kicking, Melfane. Come feel." "I won't be able to feel
That's
it
what
yet,
I'm going to do.
Majesty.
Is still
Not
do
until they're strong."
a roach and a flower.
She
But
began
they
the
had a
normal
deal
daily
at the
routine.
dispensary.
Listen to Elaine's heartbeat.
I've already hit
then
some out
listen
of
for
this
the
one,
baby.
but
Melfane still wouldn't believe there were twins. After that, she inspected and prodded Elaine, performing all of the tests in her secretive list of annoying and embarrassing things to do to women.
Baby Yoda.
Finally, Melfane placed hands on hips, regarding Elaine, who was doing up her nightgown.
This is the other one.
"I think you've been straining yourself too much lately. I want you to be certain to take proper rest. My cousin Tess's daughter had a child not 2 years ago who was birthed barely breathing. Light be thanked that the child
But they had
survived.
a deal for
But she had been working the fields late through the day before and not taking proper meals. Imagine. Take care of yourself, my
4-gram
Your
jars for
babies will be
50
thankful
bucks. So
for it."
there's 4 grams there.
Elaine nodded,
There's 4 grams
relaxing.
there.
"Wait," she said, sitting up. "Babies?" "Yes," Melfane said, walking to the door. "There are 2 heartbeats in your womb, sure as I have 2 arms. Don't know how you knew it." "You heard the heartbeats!" Elaine exclaimed, elated. "Yes, they're there, sure as the sun."
So
Melfane shook her head
after
and laughed, sending
I get 2
Naris
rolled
and
up,
Stephanie to dress her and brush her hair.
we'll do a dab.
Elaine endured the process in a state of amazement. Melfane believed. She couldn't stop herself from smiling.
My crew
An hour
passed
later,
that up.
she settled into her small sitting room, windows all thrown open to let in the sunlight, sipping warm goat's milk. Master Nori entered on long, spindly legs, tufts of hair sticking up behind the backs of his ears, face long and peaked, leather folder under his arm. He was accompanied by Dialin, who didn't usually attend the morning meeting. Elaine raised an eyebrow at the woman. I have the information you requested, Elaine, Dialin said, pouring herself some morning tea. Today it was cloudberry. I hear Melfane heard heartbeats. She did indeed. My congratulations, Your Majesty, Master Nori said. He opened his folder and began arranging his papers on the tall, narrow table beside her chair. He rarely sat down in Elaine's company. Dialin took one of the other comfortable chairs beside the hearth. What information had Elaine requested of the woman? She didn't recall asking for anything specific. The question distracted her as Nori went over the daily reports on the various armies in the area. There was a list of altercations between sellsword groups. He also talked of food problems. Despite the kinswomen making gateways to Rand's lands to the south for supply, and despite the caches of unexpected food stores that had been discovered in the city, Camelin was running low. Finally, as for our guests, Nori said, messengers have arrived with the anticipated responses. None of the three houses whose nobility had been captured could afford to pay ransom. Once the Aron, Sarand, and Marn estates had been among the most productive and extensive in Andor, and now they were destitute, their coffers dry, their fields barren, and Elaine had left two of them without leadership. Light. What a mess. Nori moved on. She had a letter from Talmanis agreeing to move several companies of soldiers from the Band of the Red Hand to Kyrian. She ordered Nori to send him a writ with her seal, authorizing the soldiers to lend aid restoring order. That was, of course, nonsense. No order needed to be restored. But if Elaine was ever going to move for the Sun Throne, she'd need to make some preliminary moves in that direction. This is what I wanted to discuss, Elaine, Dialin said, as Nori began to pack up his papers, arranging each one with meticulous care. Light helped them if one of those precious pages tore or got a stain on it. The situation in Kyrian is complex, Dialin said. When is it not? Elaine asked with a sigh. Do you have information on the political climate there? It's a mess, Dialin said simply. We need to talk about how you're going to manage the maintenance of two nations, one in absence. We have gateways, Elaine said. True, but you must find a way to take the Sun Throne without letting it look as if Andor is subsuming Kyrian. The nobility there might accept you as their queen, but only if they see themselves as equals to the Andorans. Otherwise, the moment they're out of your sight, the schemes will grow like yeast in a warm bowl of water. They will be the equals of the Andorans, Elaine said. They won't see it that way if you go in with your armies, Dialin said. The Kyrianen are a proud people, who think of themselves living, conquered beneath Andor's crown. They lived beneath Ram's power. With all due respect, Elaine, Dialin said. He is the dragon reborn. You are not. Elaine frowned, but how did one argue with that? Master Nori cleared his throat. Your Majesty, Lady Dialin's advice is not born of idle speculation. I have heard things. Knowing of your interest in Kyrian, he's been growing better at gathering informants. She'd turn him into a regular spy master yet. Your Majesty, Nori continued, voice lower. Rumors are claiming that you'll soon come to seize the Sun Throne. There is already talk of rebellion against you. Idle speculation, I'm certain, but the Kyrianen could see Rand al'Thor as an emperor, Dialin said. Not a foreign king. That is a different thing. Well, we don't need to move armies to take the Sun Throne, Elaine said thoughtfully. I am not certain of that, Your Majesty, Nori said. The rumors are quite pervasive. It seems that as soon as the Lord Dragon announced the throne was to be yours, some elements in the nation began working very subtly to prevent it from happening. Because of these rumors, many people worry that you will seize the titles of the Kyrianan nobility and give them to Andorrans instead. Others claim you will relegate any Kyrianan to a secondary state of citizenship. Nonsense, Elaine said. That's plain ridiculous, obviously, Nori said. But there are many rumors. They do tend to grow like choke vines. The sentiment is strong. Elaine gritted her teeth. The world was fast coming to be a place for those with strong alliances, knit together with bonds of both blood and paper. She had the best chance of uniting Kyrian and Andor that any queen had had in generations. Do we know who has been starting the rumors? That has been very difficult to ascertain, my lady, Nori said. Who stands to benefit most? Elaine asked. That's the first place we should look for the source. Nori glanced at Dylan. Any number of people could benefit, Dylan said, stirring her tea. I would guess that those with the greatest chance of taking the throne themselves would benefit the most. Those who resisted Rand, Elaine guessed. Perhaps, Dylan said, or perhaps not. The strongest of the rebellious elements received great attention from the dragon, and many of them were either converted or broken. So his allies, those he trusted,
I haven't got two roads yet. I'm still working on the first one.
To him, are the ones we should probably suspect. This is Kyria, after all.
I hate using these ones.
Yes, it would make sense for Rand's allies to resist her ascent to the throne. Those who had been favored by Rand would be favored for the throne should Elaine prove incapable. However, those people would also have undermined their chances by professing allegiance to a foreign leader. I should think, Elaine said thoughtfully, that those in the best position for the throne would be those in the middle. Anyone who didn't oppose Rand and so didn't earn his ire, but also someone who didn't support him too wholeheartedly. Someone who can be viewed as a patriot who can reluctantly step in and take power once I fail. She eyed the other two. Give me the names of anyone who has risen sharply in influence recently. A nobleman or woman who fits those criteria. Dylan and Master Nori nodded. Eventually, she would probably have to build a stronger network of eyes and ears, as neither of these two was perfectly suited to leading them. Nori was too obvious, and he already had enough to do with his other duties. Dylan was... Well, Elaine wasn't certain what Dylan was. She owed much to Dylan, who seemed to have taken it upon herself to act as a surrogate mother to Elaine, a voice of experience and wisdom. But eventually, Dylan would have to take a few steps back. Neither of them could afford to encourage the notion that Dylan was the real power behind the throne. But Light, what would she have done without the woman? Elaine had to steel herself against the sudden surge of feeling. Blood and bloody ashes. When was she going to get over these mood swings? A queen couldn't afford to be seen crying on a whim. Elaine dabbed her eyes. Dylan wisely said nothing. This will be for the best, Elaine said firmly, to distract attention from her treacherous eyes. I'm still worried about the invasion. Dylan said nothing to that. She didn't believe that Chesmal had been talking of a specific invasion of Andor. She thought that the Black Sister had been speaking of the Trolloc invasion of the borderlands. Birgitta took the news more seriously, beefing up soldiers on the Andorran borders. Still, Egwene would very much like to have control of Kyrian. If Trollocs were to march on Andor, through her sister realm would be one of the avenues they might use. Before the conversation could go further, the door to the hallway opened, and Elaine would have jumped in alarm had she not felt that it was Birgitta. The warder never knocked. She strode in, wearing a sword, reluctantly, and her knee-high black boots over trousers. Oddly, she was followed by two cloaked figures, their faces hidden by hoods. Nori stepped back, raising a hand to his breast at the irregularity of it. Everyone knew that Elaine didn't like to see visitors in a small sitting room.
The regular one.
If Birgitta was bringing people here, Matt? Elaine guessed. Hardly, a familiar voice said, firm and clear. The larger of the figures lowered his hood,
that sucks.
revealing a perfectly
Definitely
beautiful
glad
masculine face.
it's smoothed
He
out.
had a square jaw and a set of focused eyes that Elaine remembered well from her childhood, mostly when he had noticed her doing something wrong. Galad, Elaine said, surprised at the warmth she felt for her half-brother. She rose, holding out her hands toward him. She'd spent most of their childhood frustrated with him for one reason
they
or
wasn't
another,
too bad.
but it was
Went
good to see him
around
alive
paying
and
bills,
well. Where have you been?
renting bills today.
I have been seeking truth, Galad
Got
said,
my check
bowing
in
with an
for the
expert
month.
bow, but he did not approach to take her hand.
Now it's all gone.
He rose and glanced to the side. I found that which I did not expect. Steel yourself, sister. Elaine frowned as the second, shorter figure lowered her hood. Elaine's mother. Elaine gasped. It was her. That face. That golden hair. Those eyes that had so often looked at Elaine as a child, judging her, measuring her, not merely as a parent measured her daughter, but as a queen measured her successor. Elaine felt her heart beating in her chest. Her mother. Her mother was alive. Morghese was alive. The queen still lived. Morghese locked eyes with Elaine. Then, oddly, Morghese looked down. Your Majesty, she said with a curtsy, still remaining beside the door. Elaine controlled her thoughts, controlled her panic. She was queen, or she would have been queen, or liked. She'd taken the throne, and she was at least the daughter heir. But now her own mother came back from the bloody dead? Please, sit, Elaine found herself saying, gesturing Morghese toward the seat beside Dialin. It did Elaine good to see that Dialin wasn't dealing with the shock any better than Elaine. She sat with her hand gripping her cup of tea, knuckles white, eyes bulging. Thank you, Your Majesty, Morghese said, walking forward, Galad joining her and resting a hand on Elaine's shoulder in a comforting way. He then fetched himself a seat from the other side of the room. Morghese's tone was more reserved than Elaine remembered. And why did she continue to call Elaine that title? The queen had come in secret, with hood drawn. Elaine regarded her mother, putting the pieces together as she sat. You renounced the throne, didn't you? Morghese gave a stately nod. Oh, thank the light, Dialin said, letting out a loud breath, hand raised to her breast. No offense, Morghese, but for a moment there I imagined a war between Trakand and Trakand. It wouldn't have come to that, Elaine said, virtually at the same time that her mother said something similar. Their eyes met, and Elaine allowed herself to smile. We would have found a reasonable accommodation. This will do, though I certainly wonder at the circumstances of the event. I was being held by the children of the light, Elaine, Morghese said. Old Pedron Nile was a gentleman in most respects, but his successor was not. I would not let myself be used against Andor. Bloody white cloaks, Elaine muttered under her breath. Like they'd actually been telling the truth when they'd written, claiming to have Morghese in their possession. Galad eyed her, raising an eyebrow. He placed the chair he'd brought over, then undid his cloak, revealing the brilliant white uniform underneath, with the sunburst on the breast. Oh, that's right, Elaine said, exasperated. I almost forgot that. Intentionally. The children had answers, Elaine, he said, sitting. Light, but he was frustrating. It was good to see him, but he was frustrating. I don't wish to discuss it, Elaine said. How many white cloaks have come with you? The entire force of children accompanied me to Andor, Galad said. I am their Lord Captain Commander. Elaine blinked, then glanced at Morgaze. The elder Trekand nodded. Well, Elaine said, I see we have much to catch up on. Galad took that as a request. He could be very literal, and began explaining how he'd come by his station. He was quite detailed about it, and Elaine occasionally glanced at her mother. Morgaze's expression was unreadable. Once Galad was done, he asked after the succession war. Conversing with Galad was often like this, an exchange more formal than familiar. Once it had frustrated her, but this time she found that, against her better wishes, she'd actually been missing him, so she listened with fondness. Eventually the conversation wound down. There was more to talk about with him, but Elaine was dying for a chance to speak just with her mother. Galad, Elaine said, I'd like to talk further. Would you be amenable to an early dinner this evening? You may take refreshment in your old quarters until then. He nodded, standing. That would be well. Dial in, Master Nori, Elaine said. My mother's survival will lead to some delicate issues of state. We will need to publish her abdication officially, and quickly. Master Nori, I'll leave the formal document to you. Dylan, please inform my closest allies of this news, so that they will not be taken by surprise. Dylan nodded. She glanced at Morgaze. Dylan wasn't one of those whom the former queen had embarrassed during the days of Robin's influence, but she had undoubtedly heard the stories. Then Dylan withdrew with Galad and Master Nori. Morgaze glanced at Birgitta as soon as the door closed. The warder was the only other one in the room. I trust her like a sister, Mother, Elaine said. An insufferable older sister sometimes, but a sister nonetheless. Morgaze smiled, then rose and took Elaine by the hands, pulling her up into an embrace. Ah, my daughter, she said, tears in her eyes. Look at what you've done. Queen in your own right. You trained me well, Mother, Elaine said. She pulled back. And you're a grandmother, or soon will be. Morgaze frowned, looking down at her. Yes, I thought as much from looking at you. Who? Rand, Elaine said, blushing, though it's not widely known, and I'd rather it stay that way. Rand Althor, Morgaze said, her mood darkening. That's Mother, Elaine said, raising a hand to grasp hers. He's a good man, and I love him. What you have heard is exaggeration or bitter rumor. But he's Elaine, a man who can channel, the dragon reborn, and still a man, Elaine said, feeling his knot of emotions in the back of her mind, so warm. Just a man, for all that is demanded of him.
The second one rolled up.
Morgaze drew her lips into a thin line. I shall withhold judgment. Though in a way I still feel that I should have thrown that boy in the palace dungeons the moment we found him skulking in the gardens. I didn't like how he looked at you even then, mind you. Elaine smiled, then gestured back to the seats. Morgaze sat, and this time Elaine took the seat directly beside her, still clutching her mother's hands. She sensed amusement from Birgitta, who stood with her back against the far wall, one knee bent so that the sole of her boot rested against the wood paneling. What? Elaine asked. Nothing, Birgitta said. It's good to see you two acting like mother and child, or at least woman and woman, rather than staring at each other like two posts. Elaine is queen, Morghese said stiffly. Her life belongs to her people, and my arrival threatened to upset her succession. It still might muddy things, Mother, Elaine said. Your appearance could open old wounds. I will have to apologize, Morghese said. Perhaps offer reparations. She hesitated. I had intended to stay away, daughter. It would be best if those who hated me still thought me dead. But no, Elaine said quickly, squeezing her hand. This is for the best. We simply will have to approach it with skill and care. Morghese smiled. You make me proud. You will be a wonderful queen. Elaine had to force herself to stop beaming. Her mother had never been free with compliments. But tell me, before we go further, Morghese said, voice growing more hesitant, I have heard reports that Gabriel was Ravine, Elaine said, nodding. It's true, Mother. I hate him for what he did. I can see him using me, driving these spikes through the hearts and loyalty of my dearest friends. And yet there is a part of me that longs to see him, irrationally. He used compulsion on you, Elaine said softly. There is no other explanation. We will have to see if any from the White Tower can heal it. Morghese shook her head. Whatever it was, it is faint now, manageable. I have found another to give my affection. Elaine frowned.
Which ones and then one
I will
regular
explain
one.
that as another
Wrote
point.
a extra one just
Morghese
in case.
I'm not certain I understand it yet. First, we must
Let's do
decide
a
what to
dab.
do about my return.
Oh,
That is easy, Elaine said. We celebrate. Yes, but nothing, Mother, Elaine said. You have returned to us. The city, the entire nation will celebrate. She hesitated. And after that, we will find an important function for you. Something that takes me away from the capital, so I cast no unfortunate shadows. But a duty that is important, so that you are not thought of as having been put out to pasture. Elaine grimaced. Perhaps we can give you charge of the western quarter of the realm. I have little pleasure in the reports of what is happening there. The two rivers? Morghese asked. And Lord Perennebar? Elaine nodded. He is an interesting one, Perennes, Morghese said thoughtfully. Yes, perhaps I could be of some use there. We have something of an understanding already. Elaine
Baby
raised an
Yoda
eyebrow.
is what it was
He
called.
was behind my safe return to you, Morghese said. He is an honest man, and honorable as well, but also a rebel, despite his good intentions. You will not have an easy time of it if you come to blows with that one. I'd rather avoid it. She grimaced. The easiest way to deal with it would be to find him and execute him, but of course she wasn't going to do that, even if reports had her fuming enough to almost wish that she could. Well, we shall begin working on a way. Morghese smiled. It will help you to hear of what happened to me. Oh, and Lini is safe. I don't know if you've worried over her or not. To be honest, I didn't, Elaine said, grimacing, feeling a spike of shame. It seems that the collapse of Dragon Mount itself couldn't harm Lini. Morghese smiled, then began her story. Elaine listened with awe and not a little excitement. Her mother lived. Light be blessed, so many things had gone wrong recently, but at least one had gone right. The threefold land at night was peaceful and quiet. Most animals were active near dusk and dawn when it was neither sweltering nor freezing. Avienda sat on a small rock outcropping, legs folded beneath her, looking down upon Ruidion, in the lands of the Gen Aiel, the clan that was not. Once Ruidian had been shrouded in protective mists. That was before Rand had come. He'd broken the city in 3 very important, very discomforting ways. The first was the simplest. Rand had taken away the mist. The city had shed its dome like an Algaida Siswai, unveiling her face. She didn't know how Rand had caused the transformation. She doubted that he knew himself. But in exposing the city, he had changed it forever. The second way Rand had broken Ruidian was by bringing it water. A grand lake through the top of the city, and phantom moonlight filtered through clouds above made the waters shine. The people were calling the lake Sodrella Aman, Tears of the Dragon, though the lake should be called Tears of the Aiel. Rand al'Thor had not known how much pain he would cause in what he revealed. Such was the way with him. His actions were often so innocent. The third way Rand had broken the city was the most profound. Avienda was slowly coming to understand this one. Nakomi's words worried her, unnerved her. They had awakened in her shadows of memories, things from potential futures that Avienda had seen in the rings during her first visit to Rodion, but that her mind could not quite recall, at least not directly. She worried that Rodion would stop mattering very soon. Once the city's ultimate purpose had been to show wise ones and clan chiefs their people's secret past, to prepare them for the day when they served the dragon. That day had come. So who should come to Ruidian now? Sending the Aiel leaders through the glass columns would be reminding them of talks they had begun to meet. This bothered Avienda in ways that itched beneath her skin. She didn't want to acknowledge these questions. She wanted to continue with tradition, but she could not get them out of her head. Rand caused so many problems. Still, she loved him. She loved him for his ignorance, in a way. It allowed him to learn. And she loved him for the foolish way he tried to protect those who did not want to be protected. Most of all, she loved him for his desire to be strong. Avienda had always wanted to be strong. Learn the spear, fight, and earn ji. Be the best. She could feel him now, distant from her. They were so alike in this way. Her feet ached from running. She'd rubbed them with the sap of a sagada plant, but she could still feel them throbbing. Her boots sat on the stone beside her, along with the fine woolen stockings that Elaine had given her. She was tired and thirsty. She would fast this night, contemplating, then refill her water skin at the lake before going into Ruidian tomorrow. Tonight she sat and thought, preparing. The lives of the Aiel were changing. It was strength to accept change when it could not be avoided. If a hold was damaged during a raid and you rebuilt it, you never made it exactly the same way. You took the chance to fix the problems. The doors creaked in the wind, the uneven pressure of the floor. To make it exactly as it had been would be foolishness. Perhaps traditions, such as coming to Ruidian and even living in the threefold land itself, would need to be re-examined eventually. But for now, the Aiel couldn't leave the wetlands. There was the last battle, and then the Shanshan had captured many Aiel and made wise ones into damane. That could not be allowed. And the White Tower still assumed that all Aiel wise ones who could channel were wilders. Something would have to be done about that. And herself? The more she thought of it, she realized that she couldn't go back to her old life. She had to be with Rand. If he survived the last battle, and she intended to fight hard to make certain he did, he would still be a Wetlander king. And then there was Elaine. Avienda and she were going to be sister wives, but Elaine would never leave Andor. Would she expect Rand to stay with her? Would that mean Avienda would need to as well? So troubling, both for herself and her people. Traditions should not be maintained just because they were traditions. Strength was not strength if it had no purpose or direction. She studied Ruidian, a place of stone and majesty. Most cities disgusted her with their corrupt filth, but Ruidian was different. Domed roofs, half-finished monoliths and towers, carefully planned sections with dwellings. The fountains flowed now, though a large section still bore the scars of when Rand had fought there. Much of that had been cleaned up by the families who lived here, Aiel who had not gone to war. There would be no shops, no arguments in streets, no murderers in alleys. Ruidian might have been deprived of meaning, but it would remain a place of peace. I will go on, she decided, pass through the glass columns. Perhaps her worries were true, and the passage was now far less meaningful, but she was genuinely curious to see what the others had seen. Besides, knowing one's past was important in order to understand the future. Wise ones and clan chiefs had been visiting this location for centuries. They returned with knowledge. Maybe the city would show her what to do about her people and about her own heart.
Chapter 46. Working Leather. Androl carefully took the oval piece of leather from the steaming water. It had darkened and curled. He moved quickly, picking it up in calloused fingers. The leather was springy and flexible now. He quickly sat down at his bench, a square of sunlight coming in through the window on his right side. He wrapped the leather around a thick wooden rod about 2 inches across, then poked holes around the edges. From there, he began stitching the leather to another piece he prepared earlier. A good stitching around the outside would keep it from fraying.
That helps out.
A lot of leather workers were casual about stitching. Not Androl. The stitching was what people saw first. It stood out, like paint on a wall. As he worked, the leather dried and lost some of its springiness, but it was still flexible enough. He made the stitches neat and even. He pulled the last few tight and used them to tie the leather around the wooden rod. He'd cut those last once the leather dried. Stitching done, he added some ornaments. A name across the top, pounded into place using his small mallet and leather-topped pins. The symbols of the sword and dragon came next. He'd made those plates himself, based on the pins the Ashaman wore. At the bottom, using his smaller letter pins, he stamped the words defend, guard, protect. As the leather continued to dry, he got out his stain and gauze and carefully colored the letters and the designs for contrast. There was a tranquility to this kind of work.
A little bit rougher,
so much of his life was about destruction these days. He knew
that
it had to be.
The temperature
just one level in the first place because he understood what was to come. Still, it was nice to create something. He left his current piece, letting it dry while working on some saddle straps. He measured the straps with the marks on the side of his table, then reached for his shears in the tool pouch that hung from the side of his table. He'd made that himself. He was annoyed to discover that they weren't in their place. Burned the day word got out that I had good shears in here. Despite Taim's supposedly strict rules for the Black Tower, there was a distressing amount of chaos. Large infractions were punished with harsh measures, but the little things, like wandering into a man's workshop and borrowing his shears, were ignored, particularly if the borrower was one of the Mahale's favorites. Androl sighed. His belt knife was waiting in Treyarch's place for sharpening. He thought. Taim would keep telling us to look for excuses to channel. Androl emptied himself of emotion and seized the source. It had been months since he'd had trouble doing that. At first, he'd been able to channel only when he was holding a strap of leather. Air had beaten that out of him. It had not been a pleasant process. Sayadine flooded into him. Sweet, powerful, beautiful. He sat for a long moment enjoying it. The change was gone. But I wondered that was. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. What would it be like to own as much of the one power as the others could? At times, he thirsted for that. He knew he was weak, weakest of the dedicated in the Black Tower. Perhaps so weak he should never have been promoted from soldier. Loghain had gone to the Lord Dragon about it, and made the promotion happen against Taim's express wishes. Androl opened his eyes, then held up the strap and wove a tiny gateway only an inch across. It burst alive in front of him, slicing the strap in two. He smiled, then let it vanish and repeated the process. Some said that Loghain had forced Androl's promotion only as a dig against Taim's authority, but Loghain had said that it was Androl's talent with gateways that had earned him the dedicated. Loghain was a hard man, broken around the edges, like a old scabbard that hadn't been properly lacquered. But that scabbard still held a deadly sword. Loghain was honest, a good man, beneath the scuff marks. Androl eventually finished with the straps. He walked over and snipped the string, holding the oval piece of leather in place. It retained its shape, and he held it up to the sunlight, inspecting the stitching. The leather was stiff without being brittle. He fitted onto his forearm.
Yep.
Yes. The molding was good.
I'm gonna have to clean that up.
He nodded to himself. One of the tricks to life was paying attention to the small details. Focus. Make the small things right. If each stitch was secure on the arm guard, then it wouldn't fray or snap. That could mean the difference between an archer lasting through a barrage or having to put away his bow. One archer wouldn't make a battle, but the small things piled up, one atop another until they became large things.
Switch out.
He finished the arm guard by affixing a few permanent ties to its back.
That one's
so
all
could bind it
dirty
in
on
place
the
on
bottom,
arm.
so.
He took his black coat off the back of his chair. The silver sword pin on the high collar glimmered in the window's sunlight, as he did up the buttons. He glanced at himself in the glass's reflection, making certain the coat was straight. Small things were important. Seconds were small things, and if you heaped enough of those on top of one another, they became a man's life. He put the arm guard on his arm, then pushed open the door to his small workshop and entered the outskirts of the Black Tower's village. Here, clusters of two-storied buildings were arranged, much like any small town in Andor. Peaked roofs, thatched, with straight wooden walls, some stone and brick as well. A double line of them ran down the center of the village. Looking only at those, one might have thought he was strolling through New Brain, Ruffendale. Of course, that required ignoring the men in black coats. They were everywhere, running errands for the Mahale, going to practice, working on the foundations of the Black Tower structure itself. This place was still a work in progress. A group of soldiers, bearing neither the sword pin nor the red and gold dragon, used the power to blast a long trough in the ground beside the road. It had been decided that the village needed a canal. Androl could see the weaves, mostly earth, spinning around the soldiers. In the Black Tower, you did as much with the power as you could. Always training, like men lifting stones to build their strength. Like how Loghain and Taim pushed those lads. Androl moved out onto the newly graveled roadway. Much of that gravel bore melted edges from where it had been blasted. They had brought in boulders through gateways on weaves of air, then shattered them with explosive weaves. It had been like a war zone, rocks shattering, spraying chips. With power and training,
This one actually has
Yashaman would be able to reduce
a nice
city walls to rubble.
Ring around it of some wax.
Androl continued on his way. The Black Tower was a place of strange sights, and melted gravel wasn't nearly the strangest of them. Neither were the soldiers tearing up ground, following Androl's own careful surveying. Lately, the strangest sight to him was the children. They ran and played, jumping into the trough left behind by the working soldiers, sliding down its earthen sides, and scrambling back up. Children, playing in the holes created by Sayadine blasts. The world was changing. Androl's own grandma, so ancient she'd lost every tooth in her mouth, had used stories of men channeling to frighten him into bed on nights when he tried to slip outside and count the stars. The darkness outside hadn't frightened him. nor had stories of frolics and fades, but men who could channel. That had terrified him. Now he found himself here, grown into his middle years, suddenly afraid of the dark, but completely at peace with men who could channel. He walked down the road, gravel crunching beneath his boots. The children came scrambling up out of the ditch and flocked around him. He idly brought out a handful of candies, purchased on the last scouting mission. 2 each, he said sternly as dirty hands reached for the candies. And no shoving, mind you. Hands went to mouths, and the children gave him bobbed heads in thanks, calling him Master Genhold, before racing away. They didn't go back to the trench, but invented a new game, running off toward the fields to the east. Andro brushed off his hands, smiling. Children were so adaptable. Before them, centuries of tradition, terror, and superstition could melt away like butter left too long in the sun. But it was good that they'd chosen to leave the trench. The one power could be unpredictable. No, that wasn't right. Sayadine was very predictable. The men who wielded it, however, well, they were a different story. The soldiers halted their work and turned to meet him. He wasn't a full Ashaman and didn't merit a salute, but they showed him respect. Too much. He wasn't sure why they deferred to him. He was no great man, particularly not here in the Black Tower. Still, they nodded to him as he passed. Most of these were the men who had been recruited from the 2 rivers. Sturdy lads and men, eager, though many were on the young side. Half of them didn't need to shave but once a week. Andro walked up to them, then inspected their work, eyeing the line of string he'd tied to small stakes. He nodded in approval. "Angle is good, lads," he said, "but keep the sides steeper if you can."
Hey, Shaw's, how you doing,
"Yes,
bro?
Master Genhold," said the one.
Hope you're doing well.
Jayan Torfin was his name, a spindly young man with dusty brown hair. He still held the power. That raging river of strength was so enticing. Rare was the man who could release it without a sense of loss. The Mahale encouraged them to keep hold of it, said that holding it taught them to control it. But Androl had known seductive sensations somewhat like Sayadine before. The exhilaration of battle, the intoxication of rare drinks from the Isles of the Seafoam, the heady feeling of victory. A man could be swept up in those feelings and lose control of himself, forgetting who he was. And Sayadine was more seductive than anything else he'd experienced. He said nothing to Taim about his reservations. He had no business lecturing the Mahale. "Here," Androl said, "let me show you what I mean by straight." He took a deep breath, then emptied himself of feeling. He used the old soldier's trick to do that. He'd been taught it by his first instructor in the sword, old one-armed Garfin, whose heavy rural Illianer accent had been virtually incomprehensible. Of course, Androl himself had a faint Tarabonner accent, he was told. It had faded over the years since he'd last been home. Within the nothing, the void, Androl could feel the raging force that was Sayadine. He grabbed it as a man grabbed the neck of a horse running wild, hoping to steer it some small way, but mostly just trying to hold on. Sayadine was wonderful. Yes, it was more powerful than any intoxicant. It made the world
damn,
more
that
beautiful,
sucks, Shaws.
more lush.
Sorry to hear that.
Holding that terrible power, Androl felt as if he'd come to life, leaving the dry husk of his former self behind. It threatened to carry him away in its swift currents. He worked quickly, weaving a tiny trickle of earth, the best he could manage, for earth was where he was weakest, and carefully shaved the sides of the canal. "If you leave too much jutting out," he explained as he worked, "then the canal flow will stay muddy as it washes away the earth on the sides. The straighter and more firm the sides, the better. You see?" The soldiers nodded. Sweat had beaded on their brows, flakes of dirt sticking to their foreheads and cheeks. But their black coats were clean, particularly the sleeves. You could judge a man's respect for his uniform by whether or not he used the sleeve to wipe his brow on a day like this. The Two Rivers lads used handkerchiefs. The more senior Ashaman, of course, barely sweated at all.
That sucks,
It would
Josh.
take these lads more practice to get that down while concentrating so much. Good men, Androl said, standing up and glancing over them. Androl laid a hand on James' shoulder. You lads are doing a fine job here. The Two Rivers. It grows men right. The lads beamed. It was good to have them, particularly compared to the quality of men Taim had been recruiting lately. The Mahale's scouts claimed they took whoever they could find. Yet why was it that most they brought back had such angry, unsettling dispositions? Master Genholt? Asked one of the soldiers. Yes, Trust? Androl asked. Have you heard anything of Master Loghain? The others looked. Androl shook his head. He hasn't returned from his scouting mission. I'm sure he'll be back soon. The lads nodded, though he could see that they were beginning to worry. They had a right to. Androl had been worrying for weeks now, ever since Loghain had left in the night. Where had he gone? Why had he taken Donalo, Mezar, and Wellen, three of the most powerful dedicated loyal to him, along? And now there were those Aes Sedai camped outside, supposedly sent with authority from the dragon to bond Ashaman. Taim had given one of his half-smiles at that, the kind that never reached his eyes, and told them the group from the White Tower had first pick, since they'd come first. The others waited impatiently. The Mahale, one of the Two Rivers
crazy,
said,
Josh.
Expression growing dark. Keep your heads on your shoulders, Androl interrupted, and don't make waves. Not yet. We wait for Loghain. The men sighed, but nodded. Distracted by the conversation, Androl almost didn't notice when the shadows nearby began creeping toward him. Shadows of men, lengthening in the sunlight. Shadows within the trough. Shadows of rocks and clefts in the earth. Slowly, deviously, they turned toward Androl. Androl steeled himself, but couldn't stop panic. This one terror he could feel despite the void. They came whenever he held Sayadine for too long. He released it immediately, and the shadows reluctantly crept back to their places. The Two Rivers lads watched him, discomfort in their faces. Did they see the wild cast to Androl's eyes? Nobody spoke of the irregularities that afflicted men of the Black Tower. It just wasn't done. Like whispering dirty family secrets. The taint was cleansed. These lads would never have to feel the things that Androl did. Eventually, he and the others, who had been in the tower before the cleansing, would become rarities. Light, but he couldn't understand why anyone in the tower would listen to him. Weak in the power and insane to boot. And the worst part was, he knew, deeply down to his very center, that those shadows were real. Not just some madness concocted by his mind. They were real, and they would destroy him if they reached him. They were real.
Yeah, I'm almost done with number one. That's good that you're doing okay, Josh.
Either option is terrifying. Either I'm insane or the darkness itself wants to destroy me. That was why he could no longer sleep at nights without huddling in fear. Sometimes he could go hours holding the source without seeing the shadows. Sometimes only minutes. He took a deep breath. All right, he said, satisfied that his voice, at least, sounded in control. You best get back to work. Keep that slope moving the right direction, mind you. We'll have a mess and a half to deal with if the water overflows and floods this area. As they obeyed, Androl left them, cutting back through the village. Near the center stood the barracks, 5 large, thick-stoned buildings for the soldiers, a dozen smaller buildings for the dedicated. Right now, this little village was the Black Tower. That would change. A tower proper was being built nearby, the foundation already dug. He could visualize what the place might someday look like. He'd once worked with the master architect. one of a dozen different apprenticeships he'd held in a life that sometimes seemed to have lasted too long. Yes, he could see it in his mind's eye. A domineering black stone tower, power-built, strong, sturdy. At its base would be blockish square structures with crenellated tops. This village would grow to become a town, then a large city as vast as Tarvalon. The streets had been built to allow the passing of several wagons at a time. New sections were surveyed and laid. It bespoke vision and planning. The streets themselves whispered of the Black Tower's destiny. Androl followed a worn pathway through the scrub grass. Distant booms and snaps echoed across the plains, like the sounds of a whip being cracked. Each man had his own reasons for coming: revenge, curiosity, desperation, lust for power. Which was Androl's reason? All four, perhaps? He left the village and eventually rounded a line of trees and came to the practice range, a small canyon between two hills. A line of men stood channeling fire and earth. The hills needed to be leveled to make room for farming, an opportunity to practice. These men were mostly dedicated. Weaves spun in the air, much more skillful and powerful than those the Two Rivers lads had used. These were streamlined, like hissing vipers or striking arrows. Rocks exploded, then bursts of dirt sprayed into the air. The blasting was done in an unpredictable pattern to confuse and disorient foes. Androl could imagine a group of cavalry thundering down that slope, only to be surprised by exploding earth. A single dedicated could wipe out dozens of riders in moments. Androl noted with dissatisfaction that the working men stood in two groups. The tower was beginning to split and divide. Those loyal to Logain shunned and ostracized. On the right, Candler, Imarin, and Nelam worked with focus and dedication, joined by Jonathan Doubtry, the most skilled soldier among the Two Rivers lads. On the left, a group of Taim's cronies were laughing among themselves. Their weaves were more wild, but also more destructive. Kurtarin lounged at the back, leaning against a leafy hardgum tree and overseeing the work. The workers took a break and called for a village boy to bring water. Androl walked up, and Aran Nelam saw him first, waving with a broad smile. The Damani man wore a thin mustache. He was just shy of his 30th year, though he sometimes acted much younger. Androl was still smarting from the time Nelam had put tree sap in his boots. "Androl," Nelam called, "come tell these uncultured louts what a Ratashan Dazer is."
Number one down.
"A Ratashan Dazer?" Androl said. "It's a drink. Mix of mead and ewe's milk. Foul stuff." Nelam looked at the others proudly. He had no pins on his coat. He was only a soldier. But he should have been advanced by now. "You're bragging about your travels again, Nelam?" Androl asked, unlacing the leather armguard. "We Damani get around," Nelam said.
Excuse me.
"You know, the kind of work my father does, spying for the crown." "Last week you said your father was a merchant," Candler said. The sturdy man was the oldest of the group, his hair graying, his square face worn from many years in the sun. "He is," Nelam said. "That's his front for being a spy." "Aren't women the merchants in Ara-Daman?" Jonathan asked, rubbing his chin. He was a large, quiet man with a round face. His entire family, his siblings, his parents, and his grandfather Buell, had relocated to the village rather than letting him come alone. "Well, they're the best," Nelam said, "and my mother is no exception. We men know a thing or two, though. Besides, since my mother was busy infiltrating the Tuathan, my father had to take over the business." "Oh, now that's just ridiculous," Candler said with a scowl. "Who would ever want to infiltrate a bunch of tinkers?" "To learn their secret recipes," Nelam said. "It's said that a tinker can cook a pot of stew so fine that it will make you leave house and home to travel with them. It's true, I've tasted it myself, and I had to be tied in a shed for 3 days before the effect wore off." Candler sniffed. However, after a moment, the farmer added, "So, Did she find the recipe or not? Nelam launched into another story, Candler and John listening intently. Imoran stood to the side, looking on with amusement. He was the other soldier in the group, bearing no pins. He was an older man, with thin hair and wrinkles at his eyes. His short white beard was trimmed to a point. The distinguished man was something of an enigma. He'd arrived with Logain one day, and had said nothing of his past. He had a poised bearing and a delicate way of speaking. He was a nobleman, that was certain. But unlike most other noblemen in the Black Tower, Imoran made no attempt at asserting his presumed authority. Many noblemen took weeks to learn that once you joined the Black Tower, your outside rank was meaningless. That made them sullen and snappish. But Imoran had taken to life in the tower immediately. It took a nobleman with true dignity to follow the orders of a commoner half his age without complaint. Imoran took a sip of water from the serving boy, thanking the lad, then stepped up to Androl. He nodded toward Nelam, who was still talking to the others. That one has the heart of a gleeman. Androl grunted. Maybe he can use it to earn some extra coin. He still owes me a new pair of socks.
Right back.
And you, my friend, have the soul of a scribe. Imoran laughed. You never forget a thing, do you? Androl shrugged. How did you know what a Ratashan Dazer was? I consider myself quite educated in these matters, yet I've heard not a word of it. I had one once, Androl said. Drank it on a bet. Yes, but where? Ratash, of course. But that's leagues offshore, in a cluster of islands not even the sea folk often visit. Androl shrugged again. He glanced over at Taim's lackeys. The village boy had brought them a basket of food from Taim, though the Mahale claimed not to play favorites. If Androl asked, he'd find that a boy was supposed to have been sent with food for the others, too. But that lad would have become lost, had forgotten, or made some other innocent mistake. Taim would have someone whipped, and nothing would change. This division is troubling, my friend, Imoran said softly. How can we fight for the Lord Dragon if we cannot make peace among ourselves? Androl shook his head. Imoran continued. They say that no man favored of Logain has had the dragon pin in weeks. There are many, like Nelam there, who should have had the sword pin long ago, but are denied repeatedly by the Mahale. A house whose members squabble for authority will never present a threat to other houses. Wise words, Androl said. But what should we do? What can we do? Taim is Mahale, and Logain hasn't returned yet. Perhaps we could send someone for him, Imoran said. Or maybe you could calm the others. I fear that some of them are near to snapping. And if a fight breaks out, I have little doubt who would see the rough side of Taim's punishments. Androl frowned. True, but why me? You're far better with words than I am, Imoran. Imoran chuckled. Yes, but Logain trusts you, Androl. The other men look to you. They shouldn't, Androl thought. I'll see what I can think of. Nelam was winding up for another story, but before he could begin, Androl gestured to Jonathan, holding up the arm guard. I saw your old one had cracked. Try this. Jonathan's face brightened as he took the arm guard. You're amazing, Androl. I didn't think anyone had noticed. It's a silly thing, I know, but... His smile broadened, and he hurried to a nearby tree, beside which sat some of the men's equipment, including Jonathan's bow. These two rivers men liked to have them handy. Jonathan returned, stringing the bow. He put on the arm guard. Fits like a dream, he said, and Androl felt himself smiling. Small things. They could mean so much. Jonathan took aim and launched an arrow, the shaft streaking into the air, bowstring snapping against the arm guard. The arrow soared far, striking a tree on a hill better than 200 paces away. Candler whistled. Ain't ever seen anything like those bows of yours, Jonathan. Never in my life. They were fellow Andorans, though Candler had come from a town much closer to Cambridge. Jonathan looked at his shot critically, then drew again, fletching to cheek, and loosed. The shaft fell true and hit the very same tree. Androl would guess that the shafts were less than 2 handspans apart. Candler whistled again. My father trained on one of those, Elon noted. Learned the art from a Two Rivers man whom he rescued from drowning in Ilion. Has the bowstring as a memento. Candler raised an eyebrow, but he seemed taken with the tale at the same time. Androl just chuckled, shaking his head. Mind if I have a go, Jonathan? I'm a pretty dead shot with a Tyron bow, and they're a little longer than most. Surely, the lanky man said, unstrapping the arm guard and handing over the bow. Androl donned the arm guard and lifted the bow. It was a black yew, and there wasn't as much spring to the string as he was used to. Jonathan handed him an arrow, and Androl mimicked the man's pull, drawing to his cheek. Light, he said at the weight of the pull. Those arms of yours are deceptively small, Jonathan. How do you manage to aim? I can barely keep it steady. Jonathan laughed as Androl's arms trembled, and he finally loosed, unable to keep the bow drawn for a breath longer. The arrow hit the ground far off target. He handed the bow to Jonathan. That was fairly good, Androl, Jonathan said. A lot of men can't even get the string back. Give me 10 years and I could have you shooting like one born in the Two Rivers. I'll stick to short bows for now, Androl said. You'd never be able to shoot a monster like that from horseback. I wouldn't need to, Jonathan said. What if you were being chased? If there were fewer than 5 of them, Jonathan said, I'd take them all down with this before they got to me. If there were more than 5, then what am I doing shooting at them? I should be running like the Dark One himself was after me. The other man chuckled, though Androl thought Norin eyeing him, probably wondering how Androl knew to shoot a bow from horseback. He was a keen one, that nobleman. Androl would have to watch himself. And what is this? A voice asked. You do be trying to learn to shoot a bow, page boy? Is this so you can actually defend yourself? Androl gritted his teeth, turning as Katarin sauntered up. He was a bulky man, his black oily hair kept long and loose. It hung around a blunt face with pudgy cheeks. His eyes were focused, dangerous. He smiled, the smile of a cat that had found a rodent to play with. Androl quietly undid the arm guard, handing it to Jonathan. Katarin was full Ashaman, a personal friend of the Mahale. He outranked everyone here by a long stride. The Mahale will hear of this, Katarin said. You do be ignoring your lessons. You have no need for arrows or bows, not when you can kill with the power. We aren't ignoring anything, Nelam said stubbornly. Quiet that, Androl said. Mind your tongue. Katarin laughed. Listen to the page boy, you lot. The Mahale will hear of your impudence also. He focused on Androl. Seize the source. Androl obliged reluctantly. The sweetness of Sayadine flowed into him, and he glanced nervously to the side. There was no sign of the shadows. So pathetic, Katarin said. Destroy that stone over there.
Now let's load
it was far too large for him.
A fresh stab in there.
But he'd dealt with bullies before, and Katarin was a bully of the most dangerous type, one with power and authority. The best thing to do was to mind. Embarrassment was a small punishment. That was something few bullies seemed to understand. Androl wove the requisite weave of fire and earth, striking at the large stone. The thin weave held almost all of the power he could manage, but it only flaked a few chips off the large stone. Katarin laughed heartily, as did the group of dedicated eating beneath the nearby tree. Bloody ashes, but you're useless, Katarin said. Forget what I said earlier, page boy. You need that bow. Androl released the one power. Katarin had had his laugh. He would be satisfied. Unfortunately, Androl felt men seize the source behind him. Jonath, Candler, and Nalom stepped up beside Androl, each of them filled with the one power and bristling with anger. The men who had been eating stood up, each holding the source as well. There were twice as many of them as there were of Androl's friends. Berterin smirked. Androl eyed Candler and the others. "Now, lads," he said, raising a hand. "Ashaman Berterin was just doing what the Mahale ordered him. He's trying to make me mad, so I'll push myself." The two groups hesitated. The intensity of their locked gazes rivaled that of the power within them. Then Jonath released the source. This caused Nalon to do likewise, and finally gruff Candler turned away. Berterin laughed. "I don't like this," Candler muttered as the group of them walked off. He shot a glance over his shoulder. "Don't like it at all. Why'd you stop us, Androl?" "Because they'd have made rubble of us faster than you can curse, Candler," Androl snapped. "Like matter. I can barely channel worth a bean, and Imaran hasn't been here a month yet. Jonath's learning fast, but we all know he's never actually fought with the power before. And half of Katerin's men saw battle beneath the Lord Dragon. You really think you and Nalon could handle 10 men virtually on your own?" Candler continued to bristle, muttering but letting the argument drop. "Makashek na from a Lashton Marquez," Nalon mumbled. "Delv Topik Saki Mir." He laughed to himself, eyes wide. It wasn't a language Androl knew. It wasn't the old tongue, that was for certain. It probably wasn't even a language at all. None of the others said anything. Nalon occasionally cackled to himself in gibberish. If asked about it, he'd claim he'd spoken in plain, ordinary words. The outburst seemed to discomfit Imaran and Jonath a great deal. They hadn't ever seen friends go mad and kill those around them. Might send that they'd never have to see it now. Whatever else Androl thought of the Lord Dragon for leaving him alone, the cleansing earned also redemption. Channeling was safe. Or at least it was safer. Channeling would never be safe, particularly now with Taim pushing them. "More and more people are taking those burning personal lessons from Taim," Nalon muttered as they walked to the shade of the trees. "Nenson's success has the men eager. We've lost a good dozen to Taim's side in the last few weeks. Soon there won't be anyone left besides. I'm afraid to talk to half the men I used to trust." "Nor," Candler said.
"What are you doing, Mark?"
"Devin Hardland, too." "Small list," Nalon said. "Two small. The Two Rivers men are with us," Jonath said. "To a man." "Still a small list," Nalon said. "And not a full Ashaman among us." They all looked to Androl. He glanced back at Taim's lackeys, laughing among themselves again. "What, Androl?" Nalon asked. "Not going to chastise us for talking like that?" "Like what?" Androl asked, looking back at them. "Like it's us against them. I didn't want you lads to get yourselves killed or imprisoned, but that doesn't mean I don't see a problem." He glanced back at them. "Aye, there's trouble here, brewing like a storm. The men who take Taim's private lessons learn too quickly," Nalon said. "Nenson was barely powerful enough to be considered for dedicated just a short time ago. Now he's full Ashaman. Something very strange is going on. And those Aes Sedai. Why did Taim agree to let them bond us? You know he's protected all of his favorites by stopping the Aes Sedai from choosing any man with the dragon pin. Burn me, I don't know what I'll do if one chooses me. I'm not going to be put on some Aes Sedai string." There were several mutters about that. "Taim's men spread rumors about the newcomers," Jonath said softly. "They talk about the Lord Dragon, and how he drove good men to turn traitor. They say he's abandoned us, and that he's gone mad. The Mahale doesn't want those rumors pointing back to him, but burn me if he isn't the source of them all." "Maybe he's right," Candler said. The others looked at him sharply. The leathery man scowled. "I'm not saying that I'm going to go jump into Taim's camp. But the Lord Dragon? What has he done for us? Seems like he's forgotten about this place." Maybe he is mad. He's not, Imaran said, shaking his head. I met him just before I came here. The others looked at him, surprised. He impressed me, Imaran said. Young, but with a powerful will. I trust him. Light. I barely spoke with him a half-dozen times, but I trust him. The others slowly nodded. Burn me, Candler said. I suppose that's good enough for me. But I wish he'd listen. I heard Logain cursing that the Lord Dragon won't hear him when he gives warnings about Taim. And if we gave him evidence? Jonathan asked. What if we could find something that proves that Taim is up to no good? Something is strange about Nansen, Nelam repeated. And that cash. Where did he even come from? And how did he grow so powerful so quickly? What if, when Logain returned, we had information for him? Or if we could take it to the Lord Dragon directly? The group turned to Androl. Why did they look to him, the weakest of them? All he could do was create gateways. That was where Katerin's nickname for Androl had come from. Page Boy. The only thing he was good for was delivering messages, taking people places. But the others looked to him. For one reason or another, they looked to him. All right, Androl said. Let's see what we can find. Bring Evan, Ardlin, and Nori into this, but don't tell anyone else. Not even the other 2 Rivers lads. Don't rile Taim or his men. But if you do find something, bring it to me. And I'll see if I can find a way to contact Logain or at least find where he went. Each man nodded, somber. Might help us if we're wrong, Androl thought, looking back at Taim's favorites. And might help us more if we're right.
Chapter 47. A Teaching Chamber. Kyle sat impatiently atop daylight, trying to keep herself from twitching as the gateway split the air. A browning meadow lay on the other side. Gaul and the maidens immediately slipped through to scout. Are you certain you don't want to come? Perrin asked Galad, who stood nearby, watching the procession with arms clasped behind his back. No, Galad said. My meal with Elaine was sufficient for us to catch up. Suit yourself, Perrin said. He turned to Fail and gestured to the gateway. She kicked daylight into motion. It was time, at long last, to face the Queen of Andor, and she had to work to contain her nervousness. Perrin passed through the gateway with her. On the other side, Camelin was close, the grand city topped by peaked towers and banners of red and white, Palace rising in the center. Low Camelin, which sprawled outside the city walls, was a growing city of its own. Perrin's procession followed them out of the gateway. It had been carefully planned to look impressive, but not hostile. Aleandra with 100 guardsmen, 100 Two Rivers archers with unstrung longbows carried like staves, 100 representatives of the Wolf Guard, including a large contingent of minor Kyrian nobility, the colored slashes on their uniforms created from cloth purchased in Whitebridge, and, of course, Gaul and the maidens. Grady came last. The man wore a neatly pressed black coat, his dedicated pin polished and gleaming on the high collar. He immediately looked westward, toward the Black Tower. He tried to make a gateway there earlier in the day when Perrin had given him permission. It hadn't worked. Perrin was disturbed by that. He intended to investigate soon, tonight or tomorrow night at the latest. Gaul and the maidens formed up around Perrin and Fail, and the procession moved down onto the road, Arganda and the squad of Perrin's wolf guards riding ahead to announce them. The rest of them moved along the road at a regal pace. Camelin's sprawling growth was even worse than that of Whitebridge. Several armies camped near Low Caneland, probably supported by the various lords who had supported Elaine's ascent to the throne. There was a distinct irregularity here. The clouds broke around Caneland. The cloud cover had been so universal elsewhere that Fail started upon seeing this. The clouds formed an open circle above the city, eerily even. Arganda and the Wolf Guards returned. "They will receive us, my lord. My lady," he announced. Fail and Perrin rode in silence as the group made its way down the road. They had discussed the coming meeting dozens of times over. There wasn't anything more to say. Perrin had wisely given her the lead in the diplomatic negotiations. The world could not afford war between Andor and the Two Rivers. Not now. As they passed through the city gates, Perrin and the Aiel grew more alert. She suffered their overprotectiveness in silence. How long would her capture by the Shido loom over her life? At times it seemed Perrin was loath to let her use the privy without 4 dozen guards. Inside the walls, the streets teemed with people, the buildings and markets packed. Refuse was beginning to pile up, and a frightening number of urchins moved through the crowds. Criers yelled about the dangerous times, some perhaps in the employ of the merchants, encouraging people to hoard. Perrin's people had bought food here, but it was expensive. Soon, Elaine would need to subsidize it, if she hadn't already. How good were the royal stores? They passed through the new city, then entered the inner city, climbing the hill to the palace itself. The Queen's guards stood at attention in their red and white tabards and burnished plate and mail outside the palace gates in the pristine white palace walls. Once past the gates, they dismounted. A force of 100 continued on with Perrin and Fail into the palace. All of the Aiel and a smaller honor guard from each contingent. The palace hallways were wide, but that many people still made Fail feel crowded. The path she and Perrin were led along was a different way to the throne room than she'd taken before. Why not use the direct way? It seemed that little had changed about the palace since Rand's time ruling it. There were no Aiel now, save for the ones Perrin had brought. The same narrow red rug ran down the middle of the hallway, the same urns at the corners, the same mirrors on the walls to give an illusion of greater size. A structure like this could stand unaltered over the centuries, paying little attention to whose feet trod the rugs and whose backside warmed the throne. In 1 year's time, this palace had known Morgaze, one of the Forsaken, the Dragon Reborn, and finally Elaine. In fact, Fail half expected, as they rounded the corner to the throne room, to find Rand lounging on his dragon throne, that strange half-spear held in the crook of his arm, a glimmer of madness in his eyes. However, the dragon throne had been removed, and the lion throne again held its queen. Rand had set that throne aside and protected it, like a flower he intended to present to a future love. The queen was a younger version of her mother. True, Elaine's face had angles that were more delicate than Morgaze's, but she had that same red gold hair and that same stunning beauty. She was tall and was showing her pregnancy at the belly and through the chest. The throne room was suitably ornate, with gilded wood trim and narrow pillars in the corners, probably ornamental. Elaine kept the room better lit than Rand had, stand lamps burning brightly. Morgaze herself stood at the base of the throne on the right side, and 8 members of the Queen's Guard stood on the left. Some lesser nobles lined the sides of the room, watching with keen attention. Elaine leaned forward on her throne as Perrin, Fail, and the others entered. Fail curtsied, of course, and Perrin bowed. Not a low bow, but a bow nonetheless. By arrangement, Alejandra curtsied deeper than Fail had. That would immediately set Elaine thinking. The official purpose of this visit was a commendation by the crown, a thanks to Perrin and Fail for bringing back Morgaze. That was just an affectation, of course. Their real reason for meeting was to discuss the future of the two rivers, but that was the sort of delicate goal that neither could speak of outright, at least not at first. Merely stating the objective would reveal too much to the other side. Let it be known, Elaine said with a musical voice, that the throne welcomes you, Lady Zareen ni Bashir Tebara, Queen Aleandra Maritha Kigarin, Perrin Ebara, no use of title for him. Let it be proclaimed in person our gratitude to you for returning our mother. Your diligence in this matter earns you the crown's deepest appreciation. Thank you, Majesty, Perrin said with his usual gruffness. Fail had spoken to him at length about not trying to dispense with the formality or ceremony. We will declare a day of celebration for my mother's safe return, Elaine continued, and for her restoration to proper status. Well, that pause meant Elaine was displeased to know that her mother had been treated as a servant. She had to realize that Perrin and Fail hadn't known what they were doing, but a queen could still claim indignation for such an event. It was an edge that perhaps she planned to use. Perhaps Fail was reading too much into the comments, but she couldn't help it. In many ways, being a lady was much like being a merchant, and she had been trained well for both roles. Finally, Elaine said, we come to the purpose of our meeting. Lady Bashir, Master Ebara, is there a boon you would ask in return for the gift you have given to Andor? Perrin rested his hand on his hammer, then looked to Fail questioningly. Obviously, Elaine expected them to ask for him to be named formally a lord, or perhaps to ask forbearance for impersonating one, along with a formal pardon. Either direction could be a result of this conversation. Fail was tempted to demand the first. It would be a simple answer, but perhaps too simple. There were things Fail had to know before they could proceed. Your Majesty, Fail said carefully, might we discuss this boon in a more intimate setting? Elaine gave that some thought, at least 30 seconds worth, which seemed an infinity. Very well. My sitting room is prepared. Fail nodded, and a servant opened a small door on the left-hand wall of the throne room. Perrin walked toward it, then held up a hand to Gaul, Sulin, and Arganda. Wait here. He hesitated, glancing at Grady. You too. None of them seemed to like that. They obeyed. They'd been warned this might happen. Fail contained her nervousness. She didn't like leaving the Ashman, their best means of escape, particularly since Elaine undoubtedly had spies and guards hidden inside the sitting room, ready to spring out should matters turn dangerous. Fail would have liked a similar protection, but bringing a male channeler in to speak with the Queen, well, this was how it would have to be. They were in Elaine's domain. Fail took a deep breath, joining Perrin, Aleandra, and Morghese in the small side room. Chairs had been arranged. Elaine had foreseen this possibility. They waited for Elaine to enter before sitting. Fail couldn't see any place for guards to be hiding. Elaine entered and waved a hand. The great serpent ring on her finger glittered in the lamplight. Fail had nearly forgotten that she was Aes Sedai. Perhaps there wouldn't be any guardsmen lurking around to help. A woman who could channel was as dangerous as a dozen soldiers. Which of the rumors regarding the father of Elaine's child were to be believed? Surely not the ones about that fool of a man in her guard. That was most likely obfuscation. Could it possibly be Rand himself? Morghese entered after Elaine. She wore a subdued gown of deep red. She sat down beside her daughter, watching carefully, remaining silent. So, Elaine said, Explain to me why I shouldn't just execute you both as traitors. Fael blinked in surprise. Perrin, however, snorted. I don't think Rand would think very highly of that move. I'm not beholden to him, Elaine said. You expect me to believe that he was behind you, seducing my citizens and naming yourself a king? You have a few of your facts backward, your majesty, Fael said testily. Perrin never named himself king. Oh, and did he raise the flag of Manetheren, as my informants tell me he did? Elaine asked. I did that, Perrin said, but I put it away of my own choice. Well, that's something, Elaine replied. You may not have called yourself a king, but holding up that banner was essentially the same thing. Oh, sit down, all of you. She waved a hand. A tray lifted off the far table and floated over to her. It bore goblets and a pitcher of wine, as well as a teapot, cups. Fetching it with the one power, Fael thought. It's a reminder of her strength. A rather unsubtle one. Still, Elaine said, I will do the best for my realm, regardless of the cost. I doubt that upsetting the two rivers, Alejandra said hesitantly, would be best for your realm. Executing their leader would undoubtedly throw the region into rebellion. So far as I'm concerned, Elaine said, pouring several cups of tea, they're already in rebellion. We came to you peacefully, Fael said. Hardly the action of rebels. Elaine took a sip of the tea first, as was the custom, to prove it wasn't poisoned. My envoys to the two rivers have been refused, and your people there gave me a message, and I quote, the lands of Lord Perrin Goldeneyes refuse your Andoran taxes. Taishar Manetheren. Leandra paled. Perrin groaned softly, a sound that came out faintly like a growl. Fael took her cup and sipped her tea. Mint, with cloudberries. It was good. The two rivers folk had pluck, that was certain. These are passionate times, your majesty, Fael said. Surely you can see that the people might be concerned. The two rivers has not often been a priority for your throne. That's putting it mildly, Perrin added with a snort. Most of us grew up not knowing we were part of Andor. Ignored us. That was because the area wasn't rising in rebellion. Elaine sipped her tea. Rebellion isn't the only reason men might need the attention of the queen who claims them, Perrin said. I don't know if you've heard, but last year we faced Trollocs on our own, and without a whisker of help from the crown. You'd have helped if you'd known, but the fact that there were no troops nearby, none capable of knowing our danger, says something. Elaine hesitated. The Two Rivers has rediscovered its history, Fael said carefully. It couldn't rest forever, not with Tarmangaiden looming. Not after sheltering the Dragon Reborn during his childhood.
More than halfway
Part
done
of me
with
wonders
round
if
two.
Manetheren had to fall, if the Two Rivers had to rise to provide a place for Rand al'Thor to be raised, among farmers with the blood and obstinacy of kings. Which makes it all the more important that I quiet things now, Elaine said. I offered you a boon so that you could ask for forgiveness. I'd pardon you, and I'll be certain to send troops so that your people are protected. Accept this, and we can all go back to life the way it should be. That isn't going to happen, Perrin said softly. The Two Rivers will have lords now. I fought it for a time. You may too, but it won't change anything. Perhaps, Elaine said. But recognizing you would be to agree that a man can just claim a title within my nation, then keep it by stubbornly gathering an army. It makes for a terrible precedent, Perrin. I don't think you realize the predicament you've put me in. We'll muddle through, Perrin said in that stubborn tone he used when he wasn't going to budge. I'm not stepping down. You're doing a poor job of persuading me you will accept my authority, Elaine snapped. Not good, Fael thought, opening her mouth to jump in. A clash here would not serve them well. Before she could speak, however, another voice cut in. Daughter, Morghese said softly, drinking her tea. If you plan to dance with Taviran, be sure that you know the proper steps. I've traveled with this man. I've seen the world bend around him. I've seen bitter enemies become his allies. To fight the pattern itself is to try to move a mountain with a spoon. Elaine hesitated, looking at her mother. Please forgive me if I overstep myself, Morghese continued. But Elaine, I promised these two that I would speak for them. I told you I would. Andor is strong, but I fear it could break itself against this man. He does not want your throne, I promise it. And the Two Rivers does need supervision. Would it be such a terrible thing to let them have the man they themselves have chosen? The small room fell silent. Elaine eyed Perrin, sizing him up. Fael held her breath. All right, Elaine said. I assume you've come with demands. Let's hear them so we can discover if there's anything that can be done. No demands, Fael said. An offer. Elaine raised an eyebrow. Your mother is right, Fael said. Perrin does not want your throne. What you two want may be irrelevant once your people get an idea in their minds. Fael shook her head. They love him, Your Majesty. They respect him. They'll do what he says.
Hey, Christopher, how you doing, bro?
Down ideas of Manetheren
Good to see you.
And why would you do that? Elaine asked. I know how fast the Two Rivers is growing with those refugees coming in over the mountains. Nations could rise and fall with the coming of the last battle. You have no reason to give up the chance to form your own kingdom. Actually, Fael said, we have good reasons.
Excuse me.
Andor is a strong
There's round two
and
done.
prosperous. The towns in the Two Rivers may be growing rapidly, but the people have barely begun to want a lord. They're still farmers at heart. They don't want glory. They want their crops to survive. Fael paused. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps there will be another breaking, but that's only more reason to have allies. Nobody wants civil war in Andor, least of all the Two Rivers folk. What do you propose, then? Elaine said. Nothing really that doesn't exist already, Fael said. Give Perrin an official title and make him High Lord over the Two Rivers. And what do you mean by High Lord? Elaine asked. He'd rank higher than other noble houses in Andor, but beneath the Queen. I doubt the others would like that, Elaine said. What of taxes? The Two Rivers is exempt, Fael said. As Elaine's expression soured, she continued quickly. Your Majesty, the throne ignored the Two Rivers for generations, not protecting them from bandits or sending workers to improve their roads, not giving them anything in the way of magistrates or justices. They didn't need it, Elaine said. They governed themselves fine. She left unsaid that the Two Rivers folk would probably have tossed out tax collectors, magistrates, or justices sent by the Queen, but she seemed to know it. Well, Fael said, nothing needs change then. The Two Rivers governs itself. You could have tariff-free trade with them, Alejandra said. Something I already have, Elaine said. So nothing changes, Fael said again, except that you gain a powerful province to the west. Perrin, as your ally and subject lord, will agree to marshal troops in your defense. He will also call up his sworn monarchs to your allegiance. Elaine glanced at Alejandra. She'd probably heard of Alejandra's swearing from Morghese, but also would want to hear it for herself. I swore fealty to Lord Perrin, Alejandra said. Gildan had long lacked for strong allies. I meant to change that. Your Majesty, Fael said, leaning forward, tea cupped in her hands before her. Perrin spent several weeks with some Shanshan officers. They have created a great pact of nations allied beneath one banner. Grandal Thor, though you may trust him as a friend, has done the same. Tyr, Ilion, and maybe now Arad Doman are beneath his rule. Nations join rather than split these days. Andor looks smaller by the hour. That's why I did what I did, Alejandra said. Well, in Fail's view, Alejandra had been caught up by Perrin as a Taviran. There hadn't been much planning, but Alejandra might see it otherwise. Your Majesty, Fail continued, there is much to gain here. Through my marriage to Perrin, you gain a tie to Saldeia. Through Aleandra's oaths, you gain Eildon. Berelain also follows Perrin, and has often mentioned her desire to find strong allies for Mayenne. If we were to speak with her, I suspect she might be willing to make an alliance with us. We could create our own pact. 5 nations, if you count the 2 rivers as one. 6, if you do take the Sun Throne, as rumor claims you will. We are not the most powerful nations, but the many are stronger than the one, and you would be at our head. Elaine's face had lost almost all of its hostility. Saldeia, what are you in its line of succession? I'm second, Fail admitted, which Elaine probably already knew. Perrin shifted in his chair. She knew he was still uncomfortable with that fact. Well, he would simply have to get used to it. Second is too close, Elaine replied. What if you end up with the throne of Saldeia? I could lose the 2 rivers to another country that way. This is easy to fix, Alejandra said. If Fail were to ascend, one of her and Perrin's children could continue as Lord of the 2 rivers. Another could take the throne of Saldeia. Put it in writing and you will be protected. I could accept such an arrangement, Elaine said. I don't have problems with it, Fail replied, looking at Perrin. I suppose. I should like one of them myself, Elaine said thoughtfully. One of your children, I mean, to marry into the Andoran royal line. If the 2 rivers is to be ruled by a lord with as much power as this treaty would give him, then I would love to have blood connections to the throne. I won't promise that, Perrin said. My children will make their own choices. It is sometimes the way of nobility, Elaine said. It would be unusual, but not unheard of, for children like ours to be engaged from birth. We won't do it that way in the 2 rivers, Perrin said stubbornly. Ever. Fail shrugged. We could offer encouragement, Your Majesty. Elaine hesitated, then nodded. That will be fine. But the other houses won't like this High Lord business. There'd need to be a way around it. Give the 2 rivers to the Dragon Reborn, Morgaze said. Elaine's eyes lit up. Yes, that would work. If I gave the area to him to be his seat in Andor. Fail opened her mouth, but Elaine cut her off with a wave of the hand. This isn't negotiable. I'll need some way to convince the other lords and ladies that I'm right to give the 2 rivers so much autonomy. If the lands are granted to the Dragon Reborn, giving him a title in Andor and making the 2 rivers his seat, then it will make sense for your home to be treated differently. The noble houses of Andor will accept this, since the 2 rivers is where Rand came from, and Andor does owe him a debt. We'll have him appoint Perrin's line as his steward. Instead of capitulating to rebels within my borders, I'll be seen allowing the Dragon Reborn, the man I love, to elevate his good friend. It might also give us some ground against the Ilion Tyr pact you mentioned, who are bound to claim that their ties to Rand give them the right of conquest. She grew thoughtful, tapping the side of her cup. That seems reasonable, Perrin said, nodding. Steward of the 2 rivers. I like the sound of that. Yes, well, Fael said. I guess it's settled then. The taxes, Elaine said, as if she hadn't heard. You put them into a trust to be administered by Perrin and his line, with the understanding that if the dragon ever returns, he can call upon them. Yes. That gives us a legal excuse for your exemption. Of course, Perrin will have authority to dip into those funds to improve the 2 rivers. Roads, food stores, defenses. Elaine looked at Fael, then smiled, taking a long drink of tea.
I'll be
I'm beginning
right
to
back.
think it was a good idea not to execute you. That's certainly a relief, Alejandro said, smiling. As the least powerful one in the Union, she stood to gain a lot from the alliances. Your Majesty, Fael said. Call me Elaine, she said, pouring a goblet of wine for Fael. Very well, Elaine, Fael said, smiling and putting aside her tea, then accepting the wine. I need to ask, do you know what is happening with the Dragon Reborn? Ox-brained lummox, Elaine said, shaking her head. The bloody man's got Egwene all riled up. Egwene? Perrin asked. She's Amerlin, finally, Elaine said, as if the fact had been inevitable. Perrin nodded, though Fael found herself amazed. How had that happened, and why wasn't Perrin surprised by it? What's he gone and done? Perrin asked. He says he's going to break the remaining seals of the Dark One's prison, Elaine said, frowning. We'll need to stop him, of course. Foolish plan. You could help with that. Egwene's gathering a force to persuade him. I think I could be of help, Perrin said. Do you know where he is currently? Fael asked. Perrin had a good idea from his visions, but she wanted to know what Elaine knew. I don't know, Elaine said, but I do know where he will be. Fortuona Atham Devi Pendrag, ruler of the glorious Shongshan Empire, marched into her teaching chamber. She wore a magnificent gown of golden cloth, cut after the highest imperial fashion. The skirt split at the front just above the knees, and was so long that it took 5 d'Arcovale to carry the sides and train. She wore an ornate headdress of gold and crimson silk, with beautiful silken wings shaped like those of an owl taking flight, and her arms glittered with 13 bracelets, each of a different gemstone combination. She wore crystal at her throat in a long strand. She had heard an owl above her window the last night, and it had not flown away when she looked out, an omen indicating great care should be taken, that the next days would be ones of important decisions. The proper response was to wear jewelry with powerful symbolism. When she entered the chamber, those inside prostrated themselves. Only the Death Watch guard, men in armor of blood red and deep green, was exempt. They bowed but kept their eyes up, watching for danger. The large chamber was windowless. Lines of stacked pottery stood at one end, a place for Damani to practice weaves of destruction. The floor was covered in woven mats where stubborn Damani were sent to the ground, writhing in pain. It would not do for them to be harmed physically. Damani were among the most important tools the Empire had, more valuable than horses or Rakan. You did not destroy a beast because it was slow to learn. You punished it until it learned. Fortuona crossed the chamber to where a proper imperial throne had been set up. She commonly came here to watch the Damani being worked or broken. It soothed her. The throne was atop a small dais. She climbed the steps, train rustling as her d'Arcovale carried it. She turned to face the room, allowing the servants to arrange her dress. They took her by the arms and lifted her back into the throne, draping her long golden skirts down the front of the dais like a tapestry. Those skirts were sewn with the writings of imperial power. The Empress is Shongshan. The Empress will live forever. The Empress must be obeyed. She sat as a living banner to the might of the Empire. Selusha took her position on the lower steps of the dais. This done, the courtiers raised themselves. The Damani, of course, remained kneeling. There were 10 of them, with heads bowed, their Suldam holding their leashes, and in a few cases patting them affectionately on the heads. King Beslan entered. He'd shaved most of his head, leaving only a dark strip on the top, and 7 of his fingernails had been lacquered, one more fingernail than anyone on this side of the ocean. excepting Fortuona herself. He still wore Altaran clothing, a uniform of green and white, rather than Shanshan robes. She had not pressed him on this. So far as she knew, since his raising, Veslin hadn't made any plans to have her assassinated. Remarkable. Any Shanshan would have immediately begun scheming. Some would have tried an assassination. Others would have decided to make only plans, but remain supportive. But all would have considered killing her. Many on this side of the ocean thought differently. She'd never have believed it, if not for her time with Matrim. That was obviously one reason why Fortuona had been required to go with him. She just wished she'd interpreted the omens earlier. Veslin was joined by Captain General Lunal Galgun and a few members of the Low Blood. Galgun was a wide-shouldered fellow with a crest of white hair atop his head. The other members of the Blood deferred to him. They knew he had her favor. If things went well here, and with the reclamation of Shanshan, there was a good chance she'd raise him to the imperial family. The ranks of the family would need to be refilled, after all, once Fortuona returned and restored order. Undoubtedly, many had been assassinated or executed. Galgun was a valuable ally. He'd not only worked openly against Suros, but had suggested the assault on the White Tower, which had gone well, extremely well. Melatine, Fortuna's Der Soldan, stepped forward and bowed again. The stout, graying woman led a Damani with dark brown hair and bloodshot eyes. Apparently this one wept often. Melatine had the presence to look embarrassed at the weeping and bowed extra low. Fortuona chose not to notice that the Damani was acting so displeasingly. This one was a fine catch, despite her petulance. Fortuona made a series of gestures to Selusha, instructing her in what to say. The woman watched with keen eyes, half of her head covered in cloth, while she waited for the hair to grow there, the other half shaved. Fortuona would eventually have to choose another voice, as Selusha was now her truth speaker. "Show us what this woman can do," Selusha said, voicing the words Fortuona had signed to her. Melatine patted the Damani on the head. "Suffa will show the Empress, may she live forever, the power of slicing the air." "Please," Suffa said, looking pleadingly toward Fortuona. "Please, listen to me. I am the Amerlin's seat." Melatine hissed, and Suffa's eyes opened wide, obviously feeling a blast of pain through the Adam. The Damani continued anyway. "I can offer great bounty, powerful Empress. If I am returned, I will give you 10 women to take my place. 20, the most powerful the White Tower has. She broke off, moaning, and collapsed to the ground. Melatine was sweating. She looked to Selusha, speaking quickly, nervously. "Please explain to the Empress of us all, may she live forever, that my eyes are lowered for not having trained this one properly. Suffa is amazingly stubborn, despite how quick she is to weep and offer others in her place." Fortuona sat for a moment, letting Melatine sweat. Eventually she signed for Selusha to speak. "The Empress is not displeased with you," Selusha voiced. "These Marath Damani who call themselves Aes Sedai have all proven stubborn." "Please express my gratitude to the Greatest One," Melatine said, relaxing. "If it pleases she whose eyes look upward, I can make Suffa perform, but there may be further outbursts." "You may continue," Selusha voiced. Melatine knelt beside Suffa, speaking sharply at first, then consolingly. She was very skilled at working with former Marath Damani. Of course, Fortuona considered herself good with Damani as well. She enjoyed breaking Marath Damani as much as her brother Halvate had enjoyed training Wild Grum. She'd always found it a pity that he had been assassinated. He was the only one of her brothers who she'd ever been fond of. Suffa finally got back onto her knees. Fortuona leaned forward, curious. Suffa bowed her head, and a line of light, brilliant and pure, cut the air in front of her. That line turned sideways along a central axis, opening a hole directly in front of Fortuna's throne. Trees rustled beyond, and Fortuna's breath caught as she saw a hawk with a white head streak away from the portal, an omen of great power. The normally unflappable Selucia gasped, though whether it was at the portal or the omen, Fortuna did not know. Fortuna covered her own surprise. So it was true. Traveling wasn't a myth or a rumor. It was real. This changed everything about the war. Veslin walked forward, bowing to her, looking hesitant. She waved for him and Galgun to come to where they could see the forest glade through the opening. Veslin stared, mouth hanging open. Galgun clasped his hands behind his back. He was a curious one. He'd met with assassins in the city and had inquired about the cost for having Fortuna killed. Then he'd had each of the men who quoted him a price executed. A very subtle maneuver. It was meant to show that she should consider him a threat, as he was not afraid of meeting with assassins. However, it was also a visible sign of loyalty. I follow you for now, the move said, but I am watching, and I am ambitious. In many ways, his careful maneuvering was more comforting to her than Veslin's apparently unwavering loyalty. The first, she could anticipate. The second, well, she wasn't certain what to make of it yet. Would Matrim be equally loyal? What would it be like to have a prince of the Ravens whom she did not have to plot against? It seemed almost a fantasy, the type of tale told to common children to make them dream of an impossible marriage. This is incredible, Veslin said. Greatest one, with this ability. His station made him one of the only people able to speak directly to her. The Empress wishes to know, Selucia voiced, greeting Fortuna's fingers, if any of the captured Marath Damani spoke of the weapon. Tell the highest Empress, may she live forever, that they did not, Galatine said, sounding worried. And if I may be so bold, I believe that they are not lying. It seems that the explosion outside the city was an isolated accident, the result of some unknown terangreal used imprudently. Perhaps there is no weapon. It was possible. Fortuna had already begun to doubt the validity of those rumors. The explosion had happened before Fortuna had arrived in Abu Dar, and the details were confusing. Perhaps this had all been a ploy by Suros or her enemies. Captain General, Selucia voiced, the greatest one wishes to know what you would do with a power such as this traveling ability. That depends, Galgun said, rubbing his chin. What is its range? How large can she make it? Can all Damani do this? Are there limitations on where a hole can be opened? If it pleases the greatest one, I will speak with the Damani and get these answers. It does please the Empress, Selucia voiced. This is troubling, Veslin said. They could attack behind our battle lines. They could open a portal like this into the Empress's own chambers, may she live forever. With this, everything we know about war will change. The members of the Death Watch Guard shuffled, a sign of great discomfort. Only Furik Kharid did not move. If anything, his expression grew harder. Fortuna knew that he would soon be suggesting a new, rotating location of her sleeping quarters. Fortuna thought for a moment, staring at that rent in the air. That rent in reality itself. Then, contrary to tradition, she stood up on her dais. Fortunately, Veslin was there, one she could address directly, and let the others hear her commands. Reports say, Fortuna announced, that there are still hundreds of Marath Damani in the place called the White Tower. They are the key to recapturing Shanchan, the key to holding this land, and the key to preparing for the last battle. The Dragon Reborn will serve the Crystal Throne. We have been provided with a way to strike. Let it be said to the Captain General that he should gather his finest soldiers. I want each and every Damani we control to be brought back to the city. We will train them in this method of traveling, and then we will go in force to the White Tower. Before we struck them with a pinprick. Now we will let them know the full weight of our sword. All of the Marath-Damani must be leashed. She sat back down, letting the room fall still. It was rare that the Empress made such announcements personally, but this was a time for boldness. You should not allow word of this to spread, Selucia said to her, voice firm. She was now speaking in her role as truth speaker. Yes, another would have to be chosen to be Fortuna's voice. You would be a fool to let the enemy know for certain we have this traveling. Fortuna took a deep breath. Yes, that was true. She would make certain each in this room was held to secrecy. But once the White Tower was captured, they would talk of her proclamation, and would read the omens of her victory upon the skies and world around them. We will need to strike soon, Selucia signed. Yes, Fortuna signed back. Our previous attack will have them gathering arms. Our next move will have to be decisive then, Selucia signed. But think, delivering thousands of soldiers into the White Tower through a hidden basement room, striking with the force of 1,000 hammers against 1,000 anvils. Fortuna nodded. The White Tower was doomed.
Don't know that there's much more to say, Baron, Tom said, leaning back in his chair, tobacco smoke curling out of his long-stemmed pipe. It was a warm night, and they didn't have a fire in the hearth. Just a few candles on the table with some bread, cheeses, and a pitcher of ale. Perrin puffed on his own pipe. Only he, Tom, and Matt were in the room. Gall and Brady waited out in the common room. Matt had cursed Perrin for bringing those two, and Aiel and Ashaman were rather conspicuous. But Perrin felt safer with those two than with an entire company of soldiers. He'd shared his story with Matt and Tom first, speaking of Malden, the Prophet, Alejandra, and Galad. Then they had filled him in on their experiences. It stunned Perrin how much had happened to the three of them since their parting. Empress of the Shanshan, eh? Perrin said, watching the smoke twist above him in the dim room. Daughter of the Nine Moons, Matt said. It's different. And you're married? Perrin grinned. Matrim Cawthon. Married. You didn't have to share that part, you know, Matt said to Tom. Oh, I assure you, I did indeed. For a Gleeman, you seem to leave out most of the heroic parts of the things I do, Matt said. At least you mentioned the hat. Perrin smiled, contented. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed sitting with friends to spend the evening chatting. A carved wooden sign hung outside the window, dripping with rainwater. It depicted faces wearing strange hats and exaggerated smiles. The Happy Throng. There was probably a story behind the name. The three of them were in a private dining chamber paid for by Matt. They brought in three of the inn's large hearth chairs. They didn't fit the table, but they were comfortable. Matt leaned back, putting his feet up on the table. He took up a hunk of used milk cheese and bit off a piece, then balanced the rest on his chair arm. You know, Matt, Perrin said, your wife is probably going to expect you to be taught table manners. Oh, I've been taught, Matt said. I just never learned. I'd like to meet her, Perrin said. She's something interesting, Tom replied. Interesting, Matt said. Yeah. He looked wistful. Anyway, you've heard a lot of it now, Perrin. That bloody Brown brought us here. Haven't seen her in over 2 weeks now. Can I see the note? Perrin asked. Matt patted a few pockets, then fished out a small white piece of paper, folded closed and sealed with red wax. He tossed it onto the table. The corners were bent, the paper smudged, but it hadn't been opened. Matrim Cawthon was a man of his word, at least when you could pry an oath out of him. Perrin lifted the note. It smelled faintly of perfume. He turned it over, then held it up to a candle. Doesn't work, Matt said. Baron grunted. So what do you think it says? Don't know, Matt said. Bloody insane Aes Sedai. I mean, they're all odd. But Varen's fallen completely off her stone. Don't suppose you've heard from her? I haven't. Hope she's all right, Matt said. She sounded worried something might happen to her. He took the note back, then tapped it on the table. You going to open it? Matt shook his head. I'll open it when I get back. A knock came at the door, then it creaked open, revealing the innkeeper, a younger man named Denzel. He was tall, with a lean face, and a head he kept shaved. The man was all but dragon-sworn, from what Baron had seen, even going so far as to have a portrait of Rand commissioned and hung in the common room. It wasn't a bad likeness. I apologize, Master Crimson, Denzel said, but Master Golden's man insisted on speaking with him. It's all right, Baron said. Grady poked his weathered face into the room, and Denzel retreated. Oh, Grady, Matt said, waving. Blown up anyone interesting lately? The Tand Ashaman frowned, looking to Baron. My lord, Lady Fail asked me to remind you when midnight arrived. Matt whistled. See? This is why I left my wife in another kingdom. Grady's frown deepened. Thank you, Grady, Baron said with a sigh. I hadn't realized the time. We'll be going soon. The Ashaman nodded, then withdrew. Burn him, Matt said. Can't the man at least smile? Flaming sky is depressing enough without people like him trying to imitate it. Well, son, Tom said, pouring some ale. Some just don't find the world particularly humorous lately. Nonsense, Matt said. The world's plenty humorous. The whole bloody place has been laughing at me lately. I'm telling you, Baron, with those drawings of us about, you need to keep your head low. I don't see how I can, Baron said. I've got an army to lead, people to care for. I don't think you're taking Baron's warning seriously enough, lad, Tom said, shaking his head. You ever heard of the Bannerth people? No, Baron said, looking at Matt. They were a group of savages who roamed what is now Almost Plain, Tom said. I know a couple fine songs about them. See, their various tribes always painted the skin of their leader red to make him stand out. Matt took another bite of his cheese. Bloody fools. Painted their leader red? They would make him a target for every soldier on the field. That was the point, Tom said. It was a challenge, you see. How else would their enemies be able to find him and test their skill against him? Matt snorted. I'd have painted a few decoy soldiers red to distract them from me, then had my archers feather their leader with arrows while everyone was trying to hunt down the fellows they thought were leading my army. Actually, Tom said, taking a sip of his ale, that's exactly what William Bloodletter did during his first and last battle with them. The Song of 100 Days talks about it. Brilliant maneuver. I'm surprised you've heard.
All right, everyone. We got to call into this stream tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone to keep stopping by. I appreciate all y'all support. Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe.